Hey everyone, welcome back. So glad you could join us today. We have an extra visitor. This is Toby. So he was sleeping on my chair and I just woke him up from his nap. So he just thinks he should be present with us today. So we'll see how this all goes. But anyways, my name is Ruth Hendrickson. It is a joy, it's a delight, it is a pleasure to have you with us today as we take a quick dive into the Word of God. And so, one of the things that we're really called to do is to impact desert places. And you see, when we walk into the desert, life comes forth. Let me say that again. When you walk into the desert, when I walk into the desert, by the very essence or the fact that we are related to Creator God, that we are sons and daughters of the Most High God, by our very presence, we bring the water from the throne room of heaven. We bring the life of the Spirit. In other words, we bring life into those desert places. So as I was thinking about all this and thinking about how we impact desert places, one of the things I got to thinking about is what's the opposite. Now, when I think of a desert place, I think of heat. Now, deserts do get cold during the night, right? Okay, so and so I get thinking of the cold because some people love the cold. However, I love the warmth. I really, really do. I unfortunately live in an area of the country where I'm cold more days than I'm warm. And of course, some of that has to do with what I think is a warm temperature and what the rest of the world thinks is a warm temperature. But anyways, I like to joke that I have not warmed up from all the years that I lived in Michigan as I was growing up. So anyways, as I was initially putting this teaching together, I was actually sitting outside and it was warm out, so I was happy. I looked around, there's a lot of green around me. It makes me happy. The birds are singing, and there's all sorts of signs of life around. So, with that, I went into Isaiah 35, and I'm going to read it out of the Passion Translation. And we're going to start at verse 1. So it says, "The wilderness and dry land will be joyfully glad. The desert will blossom like a rose and rejoice." So just a quick side note here, I usually don't think of wilderness and dry land, again, as having a lot of signs of life. Some things survive there, some things are created to actually live there, but they're not usually creatures that we would call beautiful or that we would say bring a lot of signs of life. So what's all going on here? What are we looking for? Let's keep going. Every dry and barren place, just say every dry and barren place will burst forth with abundant blossoms, dancing and spitting with delight. Lebanon's lush splendor covers it, the magnificent beauty of Carmel and Sharon. My people will see the awesome glory of Yahweh, the beautiful grandeur of our God. Strengthen those who are discouraged, energize those who feel defeated. Say to the anxious and the fearful, be strong and never afraid. Look, here comes your God. He's breaking through to give you victory. He comes to avenge your enemies with divine retribution. He comes to save you. Then the blind eyes will open and the deaf ears will hear. Then the lame will leap like playful deer, and the tongue tied will sing songs of triumph. Gushing water will spring up in the wilderness, and streams will flow through the desert. The burning sand will become a refreshing oasis, the parched ground, bubbling springs. The dragon's lair, a meadow with grass, reeds, and papyrus. There will be a highway of holiness called the sacred way. The impure will not be permitted on this road, but it will be accessible to God's people, and not even fools will lose their way. The lions will not be found there, no wild beast will travel on it. They will not be found there, but the redeemed will find a pathway on it. Yahweh's ransomed ones will return with glee to Zion. They will enter with a song of rejoicing and be crowned with everlasting joy. A static joy will overwhelm them. Weariness and grief will disappear. So as I look at this again, that's Isaiah 35 out of the Passion Translation. And as I look at it, I see life and promise. I see that desert just changing its whole countenance, the whole atmosphere changing, so much life coming in. You see, we can grab onto this in our personal desert seasons because we all go through seasons of life that feel like a desert, that are dry and weary. But with this, there's a promise that we do not have to be consumed by the desert. but rather we can consume the desert with the goodness of God. Let me say that again. You and I don't need to be consumed by the desert, but within us, because of our relationship with the Lord, because of who He is, we can consume that desert and bring life into it. Again, go back. Let's look at this real quick. The dry and barren places will burst forth with blossoms. There will be dancing and spinning with delight. There will be a lush splendor. There will be beauty. In the middle of your desert, even you could see the awesome goodness. I could see the awesome goodness of God. There's strength that comes even in those desert seasons. There's strengthening, especially for those who are discouraged. And there's energy for those who feel defeated, because in the desert, we can often feel depressed. We can feel defeated. We can feel worthless. We can feel hopeless. It's a parched, dry, and weary land. So that's what we can feel. But we have to grab onto the promise of God. And so it says, verse 4 again said, just say to the anxious and the fearful, be strong and never afraid. Look, here comes your God. So in those desert seasons, it's okay to have a talk with ourselves and say, be strong. Hey, I know you're in a desert. I know everything looks dry, but be strong and never afraid. Don't let fear come in. Remember, fear, other than the fear of God, fear as we know it. Okay. Fear is an enemy to our walking in the goodness of God. So we can't afford to allow fear to come in, even in the desert seasons, because God is breaking through to give us victory. Now, I want to be real honest. When we're in the desert, sometimes the outcome or the path out, the journey out of that desert doesn't look the way that we think it should, the way we wish it did, or the way we want it to. And so those are again really, really difficult transitional seasons where we're trying to grab a hold or get our footing. Sometimes I think of doing free climbing on a rock wall, which I've never done, by the way, but anyways, I watch people do it, trying to find the spots where they can grab onto or the toe holds so that they can keep moving up. And if you watch climbers, sometimes they can't find anything. And what's happening, that's how we feel sometimes in the desert seasons. We're like, God, this is what your word says, and I'm trying to climb it, but right now it feels really steep. It's really dry. I'm really parched. I'm really tired. I can't get a hand grip. I can't get a foothold. And so I am just stuck. I am defeated. And yet, how do you begin to come out of that? It's actually through worship. It is actually through worship. Worship becomes the places we can grab onto, the places where we can find a toehold and begin to climb up, because that's one of the things that worship does. And remember, it says that in the midst of this, even in the midst of the desert, as he breaks through to give us victory. We see the signs, wonders, and miracles. We see the blind eyes open, and we see the the lame healed. I even love this. The tongue tied will sing songs of triumph. That has a real special meaning to me, because I have a child who was actually tongue tied as a young child. They had to have surgery, and so to see the tongue tied singing songs of triumph is absolutely phenomenal, absolutely wonderful, because it means that their speech is freed up. And so again, the gushing water, a desert, when there's gushing water, things burst into bloom, right? When the rains come, things burst into bloom. And of course, that burning sand that burns your feet. If you've ever walked on a beach on a hot summer day, by the time it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you burn your feet. Okay. How much worse in a desert place? And yet the promise is that burning sand actually becomes a refreshing oasis. In other words, anything that's part of that desert season wants to drain the life out of us. In the hands of God, as Yahweh breaks in, it actually becomes something that refreshes, that gives life. And again, that highway of holiness. One of the things worship does is helps us find that highway of holiness. And that as we do that, then of course, we're bringing life into the desert, or we're consuming the desert rather than allowing the desert to consume us. Why is this so important? Because we can get so caught up in the desert that we forget that God is the expert at new beginnings, at bringing dry seasons to an end, at actually putting water into the dry seasons so that they flourish. You and I were actually created to flourish during dry seasons, not to shrivel up and die. Okay, so you can just say that right now. I was created to flourish even a dry season. I was not created to shrivel up and die. I was created to bring life into that season. I was created to navigate it, not just crawl through, but to actually be able to dance through the desert, even in the midst of grief, even in the midst of pain, because of who my God is and because of who I am, who he's made me to be, who he is and who he's made me to be. In this verse, that word blossom is used in that passage. In Hebrew means to break forth and bloom. It can also mean, this is really important, it can also mean to spread wings and fly. Think about this. If we're in a desert season and there's breakthrough and we begin to soar, what does that do? It takes us out of that season. It changes. We actually change heights. We change atmosphere. The air that we're breathing changes. And there's another thing that changes. Our viewpoint changes, because it's very different to be looking from the desert platform than to be up in the sky looking with a bird's eye view. Everything changes. So whether we're blossoming and blooming because the refreshing of the Lord is coming in, or whether we've risen up to soar, which changes not only the atmosphere, it changes our viewpoint. Both of those images speak to not staying in the desert season. So again, you were not meant to stay in the desert. You might find yourself there for a season, but the desert is not your destiny. And that's something that we need to just say right now. The desert is not my destiny. The desert is not my destiny. So I could think of a number of movies. I can't remember a single title at the moment, but such as that. But where people begin to sing, and the lighting increases, and or you see the animals gather, you see the smiles and the laughter come onto the scene. You see, that's just a picture of what God promises for the believer. Again, the desert is not your destiny. So the question is, are we going to allow the desert seasons to control us, or are we going to change the atmosphere of the desert and usher in life? Remember in John 7:38, it reminds us that when we believe in Jesus, the rivers of living water will burst forth from within you, flowing from your innermost being. So it bursts forth because of the deposit that's been placed within us. When we worship, when we spend time with God in the easier seasons, okay, there's a deposit, there's a reservoir forming within us. Part of that reason for that reservoir is to get us through the desert seasons. So again, what happens when the water flows into that desert season? Well, it's going to bloom. And what does bloom mean? Oh, it can mean abundant, the blossoms. But remember, it can also mean to soar. Both concepts. Again, you're not created to stay in the desert. So some of you, I want to speak to right now, because you've been in a desert season and you've actually unintentionally come into alignment with that desert season. Okay, you're looking around and all you see is the dust. All you see is the hopelessness. All you see is the lack. And there's an invitation right now to begin singing. I want you to take this situation or these situations that are putting you in this desert place. And I want to encourage you to write them down. And then I want you to put them in front of you. And then I want you to begin to worship. Or put them under your feet and begin to worship, begin to just go into praise and worship of adoration for who God is. A great song would be the one by, I think it's by Elevation, turning graves into gardens. That's what God does. That's the promise for the desert season. So there's a lot of songs like that. They're upbeat, they're declaring, they're prophesying over your life. They're bringing the truth of the word of God. And you begin to sing it and worship it and find those footholds as you begin to climb up. Because again, you were created to bring life into the desert. So if you've come into alignment with the desert season, just ask the Lord for forgiveness. Write down what's holding you there. Put it under your feet. Stand up. Don't sit. Stand up and begin to worship the living God and begin to speak to those desert places, because you were created. You are created not to come into alignment with those seasons, but to speak life into them. We walk through them. Every single one of us has desert seasons, but we're not created to live there. We're not created to set up camp there. We're not created to even adjust to the atmosphere there. We carry something different. And because of who God is, those desert seasons might not look the way we want it to look, may not, but we can trust God with the desert seasons to speak life, because he's good. So what are you carrying? What are you bringing into that desert season? Do you need to make some adjustments? You were created to bloom even in the desert. You were created to have impact even in the desert. Don't let anything or anyone tell you otherwise. So again, thank you for joining me today. I am honored and delighted that you have taken time to be with me. If you want to find out more about the ministry, just go to ruthhendrickson.org. If you haven't already done so, we invite you to sign up for that email list just so that we can stay connected. We'll send out some highlights every week. So again, the website is ruthhendrickson.org. And if this is ministered to you, please feel free to share it. Just hit that share button and let people know why you're sharing it. So again, thank you for joining us. Have a great day. Be so blessed. And remember, you're created to bloom in the desert. You're created to soar above your circumstances. You are created for so much more than you can even imagine, because we have an amazing God and he loves you so very much. Have a fantastic day.